Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. My dear students, today we are going to talk about poets in the Romantic Age. Previously, the last lecture was Romantic Age in general, and we talked about the historical events as well which took place in that very era. Okay, so my dear students, here you can see, like previously I told you that the Romantic age was started in 1785, and now here you might be getting confused that this is 1798. So if you'll find out this date somewhere, like the Romantic age was started in 1798, so this is the official start of the Romantic age, because William Wordsworth and S.T. Coleridge, they published the lyrical ballads for the first time in 1798, and that was the masterpiece. Okay, my dear student, this is your lecture 14, History of English Literature class, MA English, ComSat's Virtual Campus, Islamabad. So my dear students, today we are going to talk about poets in the Romantic age in detail, and we'll focus on their works. Alright? Let me just give you the introduction and whatever we have discussed so far in the previous lecture as well, that this is just the introduction of all things. Okay, the most fruitful period, the revolt against the classical school which had been started. Most popular English poets like Wordsworth, Coleridge, Byron, Shelley and Keats belong to this period. So basically this is the most fruitful period, and where you'll find out the creativity of the writers as well, and the spontaneous writings are also present there. So this is basically a revolution against the classical school, okay, which used to follow the classical domains and the classical doctrines of writing literature, the Greece and the Roman traditions which they had to follow there. Okay, and you can see like William Wordsworth, Coleridge, Byron, Shelley and Keats. These are the eminent personalities during the Romantic era. Okay, dear students, as you know that we are talking about the Romantic era in the history of English literature, and I told you that this is the most fruitful period in you can say history of English literature. Okay, so I'm just giving you the historical background of the Romantic era, what was basically happening at that time and how that period was started, and you can say like how poets in that period, they violated you can say the traditions of you can say classical school. Okay, so we'll talk about everything in detail, like we'll focus on their works, but here this is just a background of the Romantic era. Okay, so basically my dear students, this is the beginning of the Romantic triumph is found by general consent in the publication in 1798 of the little volume of lyrical ballads, which contain the first significant poetry of Wordsworth and Coleridge. So dear students, here you can see like for the very first time how that era was started in the history of English literature. It was with the publication of the lyrical ballads. This is a work written by Wordsworth and Coleridge. Okay, so this is basically a combination of different poems there. So for the very first time, it was really a very marvelous work. So it entirely changed the whole tradition of English literature, and you could see like we are here entering into the new era, that is the Romantic age in the history of English literature. Even during this its greatest period, however, Romanticism had for a long time a hard battle to fight, and a chief literary fact of the period was the founding and continued success of the first two important English literary and political quarterlies. So dear students, here our focus basically is on Romanticism. So you can see for a longer period of time, Romanticism, like people, they did not accept romantic touch in the poetry as such. So here once more you'll see you can say the essence of the previous age, that's the classical age, in the Romantic age as well. Okay, so dear students, basically at that time you could see like English literature was you can say adopting a new tradition of adding romance, love, nature and human relationships in poetry. So you could see like for a longer period of time people did not accept the tradition, and they were still following the previous school of thought, that's the, you can say, classicism. Okay, so dear students, here you'll see like a change in the entire history of English literature with the arrival of the book Lyrical Ballads that were published in 1798 by Wordsworth and Coleridge. Okay, so basically when you read out that publication, so you'll see a new touch in poetry. Okay, like they usually focus on, you know, love, natural elements, and you can say the mysteries of nature. Okay, so previously when we were talking about like the classical age, so dear students, at that time people, they were more into you know, focusing on style a lot. Okay, so here in the Romantic era, people move towards you can say towards theme. Okay, so basically they did not focus on style as such, like this is a set of rules and you'll have to follow it. It was not the case in the Romantic era. They focused on theme, and you can say the overall theme of their poetry was nature, as you could see the elements of nature in Wordsworth poetry, in Keats poetry as well. Okay, so my dear students, here basically the point of discussion today is to let you know what basically Romantic period is and how you can say important that period is in the entire history of English literature. Okay, the Edinburg Review and the Quarterly Review, which in general stood in literature for a conservative 18th century tradition and violently attacked all or almost all the Romantic poets. These quarterlies are sufficiently important to receive a few words in passing. So here, dear students, you can see the names of two more publications, like how they promoted Romanticism in English literature. Okay, so here, my dear students, you can focus on one thing, like this is a conservative 18th century. On this one, conservative 18th century. So dear students, as I am telling you, you can say time and again about different eras, like when we enter into the new century or into the new period in the history of English literature, so we call, you can say, the previous era full of flaws, and you can say full of conservative thoughts are there. So same is the case with the Romantic era over here. People at that time, like poets and the writers, they used to call you can say the previous era, the 18th century literature, conservative. Okay, so that is why they wanted a change in poetry. Okay, usually in poetry, and you can say other genres in literature as well. Okay, so that is why previously the focus was on you can say the ancient Greek and Roman writings. Okay, they were the ideals during the classical era. So my dear students, here we are going to focus on, you can say, the revival of medieval ages once more in the Romantic era. So if you just compare the classical ages, so that's basically they were following the tradition of the Greek and Roman literature of you can say writing anything. So here in the Romantic era, you could see the revival of the medieval ages. So my dear students, here their poetry is full of romance, full of you can say love for nature, love for human beings, love for your relationships. Okay, so previously it was just you can say the traditional ways of writing tragedies or of writing epic poems. Okay, so basically here you can see like the shift or the transition this is basically a transitional phase. Okay, so dear students, one of the most important elements you can say in the Romantic era is that of imagination. Okay, poets, they were quite imaginative, they were not as such realistic. Okay, so according to them, in order to show something to the people or in order to build up you can say the image of something into the minds of the readers, so it is very much important to be imaginative. So at times you cannot be realistic. So my dear students, they focused on imagination a lot. Okay, so here I'll tell you you how. The imagination was elevated to a position as the supreme faculty of the mind. So my dear students, basically according to them it is basically the supreme faculty of the mind. Okay, so you cannot write anything if you are not imaginative. For example, if you want to write something about your future, so definitely you are imagining. Okay, so according to them, if you are not imaginative, you can never be a good poet or a good writer. Okay, this contrasted distinctly with the traditional argument of the supremacy of reason. So here, dear students, imagination and reason. Okay, so my dear students, when you talk about the Romantic era, so the Romantic writers, they focused on imagination, and if you talk about the classical ages, so they used to talk about reason. Okay, there must be a reason behind anything, and there must be a logic behind every concept. So here you can see like they violated the traditional argument of writing literature, that there must be a reason or a logic behind everything. Okay, the Romantics tends to define and to present the imagination as our ultimate shaping or creative power. So here, my dear students, here imagination for them is your creative power. If you are not imaginative, you cannot be creative. Okay, the approximate human equivalent of the creative powers of nature or even deity. Okay, so dear students, when we talk about Romantic literature, so you can find out over here, according to them, if you're not imaginative, you can never be creative. So this is basically the supreme faculty of mind, and you can say this is one of the human attributes as well, like you'll have to be imaginative. So in order to show your creativity in your writing, imagination is very much important. Okay, my dear students, for example, if you can say even if you are not talking about this world, like you are talking about the supernatural elements, as you could see in Coleridge's poetry. So my dear students, you could see like the way that he has presented, you can say, all those supernatural elements, or when we talk about P.B. Shelley poetry, so dear students, you could see the element of imagination is very much present there. On the other hand, when we talk about William Wordsworth's poetry, so again, love for nature, okay, or you could see like appreciation of beauty, or you can say what was basically the motivational factor for him, everything is based on imagination. For example, when we talk about his poem Solitary Reaper, the way that girl is singing a song in the fields, so everything that is based on imagination. So basically they targeted, you can say, nature a lot. So in order to present that nature in writing, so according to them, it is very much essential to be imaginative. Okay, so here you could see we are entering into a new philosophy. Previously it was based on reason, and here it is based on imagination. So classical writers, they used to call imagination like that is something fake and that's not based on truth. Okay, so here according to them, imagination is everything. You can never be a good poet if you're not imaginative. So in order to put something you can say in form of literature, so imagination is essential. It is dynamic and active rather than passive power with many functions. Imagination is the primary faculty of creating all art. So dear students, here this is dynamic, it has many dimensions. Okay, it is an active process. Okay, it is not at all passive, like you are you can say static on one point, or you're not flexible. This is basically active. So you actively observe something and then you become imaginative, and then you put that thing in your writing. So that was their point of view, which is very much important. Okay, so here you could see the multi-functionality of you can say imagination as well. Okay, so basically according to them, this is the primary faculty for creating all art. So dear students, according to them, you cannot create any kind of art if you are not imaginative. So basically when somebody asks you what is the most important point about you can say Romantic era poets, so my dear students, you'll just say like their love for nature and their imaginative power was very much strong. Okay, so here this is the primary faculty. Okay, my dear students, we are talking about imagination over here. Okay, so So this is not just relevant to literature, like for writing anything, or for, you can say, expressing your views in form of language. Imagination is important. It is very much important for all kind of art. For example, if you are a painter, if you are you can say music composer. So dear students, here basically the thing is that you'll have to be creative. Okay, so how can you achieve that creativity? That is through your imagination. Okay, so if you want to be creative, so you'll have to dream about the things. You have to create your ability of, you can say, imagination in your mind. So my dear students, here we are moving towards the thinking process as well. Like imagination leads you towards, you can say, exploring new and new things, to create new things, or to write new things as well. So here, my dear students, you can see, you can say, the multi-dimensional, you can say, nature of imagination over here for creating any kind of art. Okay. On a broader scale, it is also the faculty that helps humans to constitute reality. For as Wordsworth suggested, we not only perceive the world around us, but also in part create it. Okay. So dear students, here you can see like imagination basically helps you in creating reality, in presenting reality. Okay, so you have to be imaginative at times, when you are realistic. So in order to put that reality in your you can say writings or in your painting, so you have to be imaginative to create that kind of scene in the mind of the reader or in the mind of the observer. Okay, so here you can see like it is the ability to perceive the world around us. So this is basically your judgment once more. Okay, so if you have the imaginative power, you can perceive the world in a good way. Okay, and here, my dear students, we are talking about like the parts which are very much important in creating the imagination or in creating the world, creating the reality. So in order to put everything in form of literature or in your painting, so you'll have to be imaginative. Okay, uniting both reason and feeling, Coleridge described it with the paradoxical phrase intellectual intuition. So my dear students, here you can see like this is a phrase, okay, that is basically used by Coleridge, that this is your intellectual intuition. Okay, so here we are not basically focusing on your imagination or your love for nature, and we are ignoring another aspect, that is reason. That's, you can say, the main motive of classical ages. So my dear students, here according to them, like we are mixing both the concepts. One is reason or logic, and the other one is your feeling, your love for nature, your love for human beings. Okay, dear students, basically this is your intellectual intuition in Coleridge words. Okay, imagination is extolled as the ultimate synthesizing faculty, enabling humans to reconcile differences and opposites in the world of appearance. So my dear student, this what basically the world in front of you, this is just, you can say, apparent world. Okay, this is just you can say a world on the surface level if you don't want to explore what basically is behind it. Okay, so in order to explore the differences and in order to know more about the world, you will have to be imaginative. Okay, so here, my dear students, you can say like this is synthesizing faculty of mind as well. Okay, so basically it enables you to reconcile differences and opposites. Okay, so my dear students, I just want to relate this concept over the previous one when we talked about imagination as an active process. So that's not you can say a passive faculty of your mind, that is an active process. So here when you are active, definitely you focus on differences, you focus on opposites. Okay, so here, my dear students, you are more creative, you are more keen observer over here when you mix reason with feeling. Okay, so you are not ignoring any concept over here. So my dear students, as the previous doctrine we were talking about, the classical ages, they focused on reason, on logic a lot. Okay, that is why they were following the traditional you can say style of writing the things, and their focus was more on style and you can say rules and regulations which you need to follow in order to write anything. So basically, you can say, like, when we talk about Romanticism, so usually it comes in our mind that they just talk about thinking, about imagination, and about feeling. It's not the case according to Coleridge. Here, during the Romantic era, your feeling and your reasons both are mixed. Okay, so here this is a combination. This era is a combination of your mind and of your heart. Okay. Here we cannot ignore the concept of thinking. That is also very much involved here. Like, you cannot be a good thinker if you are not imaginative. This was their point. Okay. The reconciliation of opposites is a central ideal for the Romantics. Finally, imagination is inextricably bound up with the other two major concepts, for it is presumed to be the faculty which enables us to read nature as a system of symbols. So my dear students, here you can see basically this was their main point, to focus on nature, to be imaginative. So here, as you know, that imagination is the basic or the primary faculty of your mind. So my dear student, it is like imagination leads you to read what is present in nature, okay, in form of different symbols. Okay, so if you are you can say if you're good in imagination, so definitely you'll be able to read different symbols in the world. Otherwise it would be an impossible task, and you can say you'll just go for the apparent reality only. So you cannot enjoy the beauty of nature, you cannot appreciate it as well. So my dear students, here basically this is like you can say this concept is bound up with other major concepts as well. For example, it is to read the nature, it is to observe the nature, it is to examine, to analyze the nature. Okay, what basically is the you can say controlling force behind nature. So if you are not imaginative, you cannot you can say clearly observe the nature or the natural elements. Okay. Okay, my dear students, let me you can say just repeat whatever I have told you so far about you can say poetry in the Romantic era or the Romantic age overall. Basically, according to Coleridge, we are not ignoring you can say reason or logic over here in the Romantic era. Basically, this you can say Romantic era is a combination of both your feeling as well as of your reason. Okay, so previously when we were talking about you can say the classical thoughts in the history of English literature, at that time they were just saying like we should focus on reason and on logic. There must be a logic behind writing every kind of thing, or even behind painting anything. Okay, so there must be a concept behind it. Okay, so basically they were not like poets at that time, they were not that much liberal, and you can say they could not enjoy freedom as such. So my dear students, when we talk about Romantic era people, they had you can say quite liberty and freedom to choose the subject matter according to their taste. For example, you could see when we will be talking about the poets during the Romantic era in the history of English literature. So my dear students, you will see like people, they talked about supernatural elements, they talked about you know nature, about love, about human attributes, human relationships, basically everything that is you can say relevant to nature, they discussed about it, and they were quite free. So my dear students, here you can say the very concept of imagination is very much present as far as the poetry of that era is concerned. So according to you can say the poets of that era, they were of the view like if you're not imaginative, you can never be a good painter, you can never be a good poet. Okay, you can never be a good novelist. So in order to put reality in a good way in your words, so definitely you'll have to be imaginative. Okay, so world around you is just you can say a surface reality. So if you are not a keen observer, if you are not a good analyst, so definitely you can never be a good poet. So my dear students, here with this concept of you can say imagination and intuition, like as you could see, we talked about intellectual intuition as well. Okay, so dear students, we'll move towards discussing you can say the eminent poets of that time who brought a new tradition in the history of English literature by changing the concepts and the trends which classical writers they were following at that time. Okay, so dear students, you'll just have to keep in mind that this age was started with the publication of the lyrical ballads in 1798 by Wordsworth and Coleridge. Okay, so here basically that's a combination of different poems you could see, and for the very first time when it was published, so the official start took place. But when we talk about romantic spirit, so it was started taking its place at the end of 18th century. Okay, so people, they started writing about, you can say, romance, about love, nature, human relationships by the end of the 18th century. But when we talk about the official start of this age, that took place in 1798. So my dear students, as you know, like this is part of syllabus everywhere, like you can say talk about or we read the poems written by Wordsworth, by Coleridge, and by Keats as well. So what basically is the reason behind it? Because they are very closer to nature, and that is why their concepts you can say catch our attention. Okay, so basically they introduced the concept of universality in their literature. How? Because you can say people who are living in the West or in East, anywhere in the world, so definitely they like nature a lot, they observe nature, so definitely that is why their literature is universal, and that is accepted worldwide. Okay, so my dear students, now we'll talk about the eminent poets of that era. Okay, so my dear students, hope you'll enjoy this period a lot, because this is the most important and most interesting period as well, as far as I'm concerned, because I'm more into, you know, love poetry. So definitely I like romanticism a lot, or this period, romantic period in the history of English literature. Okay, first of all, I'll give you the introduction, then the romantic poetry. As you know, the focus of today's lecture is on the romantic poetry. Then we'll focus on the works of William Wordsworth, S.T. Coleridge, J.J. Byron, P.B. Shelley, and John Keats. And my dear student, you can see, like as previously I told you, that this era was ruled by these you know, poets. All right, so first of all, introduction to the romantic period in the history of English literature. English Romanticism begins in 1798 with the publication of Wordsworth and Coleridge's The Lyrical Ballads, and ends in 1832 with Wordsworth Scott's death. William Blake and Robert Burns also belong to this literary genre, though they lived prior to the Romantic period. So basically, when we talk about William Blake and Robert Burns, they also, usually people think that they also belong to this era, but in fact they lived prior to the Romantic period. Okay, so you can see, like we took a start from the Romantic period with the publication of the Lyrical Ballads by William Wordsworth and S.T. Coleridge. All right, so my dear students, again I'm just giving you the briefing of the Romantic era in the history of English literature before moving towards the works. Okay, English Romanticism is a revolt of the English imagination against the neoclassical reason. So my dear students, here you'll have to focus on 2 points. All right, imagination and reason. So basically this was a point by the classical or the neoclassical writers. So here you can see, like in Romanticism, the focus was changed into imagination. Okay, the poets, they have to be imaginative in order to present any kind of things to the readers. Okay, previously the focus was on reason. Okay, the French Revolution of 1789 to 1794 and the English Industrial Revolution exert great influence on English Romanticism. We had enough debate on the Industrial Revolution and the French Revolution as well on Romanticism. The Romanticists express a negative attitude towards the existing social or political conditions. They place the individual at the center of art, as can be seen from Lord Byron's Byronic hero. So we already have discussed about the qualities of the Byronic heroes as well. So basically this is Romanticism. It's an approach, you can say, or it's a movement, and it's to express the negative attitude towards the classical period first of all, and then that is a negative attitude towards the existing social and political conditions of that time. We have discussed about the Industrial Revolution, like how they converted rulers of that time. They converted the agriculture country into the manufacturing society. Plus, what happened there, like most of the people who didn't possess any land at that time, they moved to the cities and the towns, and the concept of urbanization we also have discussed. So my dear students, what you have to follow here, like this is just a briefing of the previous lecture, okay? And one more thing, they place the individual at the center of the art. This is the characterization of the Romantic period as well. They focused on individual. Fine. So basically they put the individual at the center of the art, and you can see it in the representation of Byronic hero as well. All right. So basically these are the points which are very much important as far as the Romantic period in the history of English literature is concerned. All right. The key words of English Romanticism are nature and imagination. So basically here, my dear students, from the age of reason, from the age of logic, from the age of the thoughts which are here stored in your head, you can see a shift from all those thoughts to, you can say, to nature, to imagination and the feelings of the heart here in the Romantic period. Okay, English Romantics tend to be nationalistic, defending and greatest English writers. They argue that poetry should be free from all rules. That is why when we were talking about William Wordsworth's point of view about poetry, that this is a spontaneous overflow of powerful emotions. Fine. So basically they are of the view that poetry should be free from all rules. You do not need to be restricted on any point, or you are not supposed to follow any kind of boundaries while writing literature or poetry. All right. I just want to give you the overview of the Romantic literature. The Romantic period is an age of poetry. So here, my dear students, again you can see when we talk about any particular era. So here you can see this is an age of poetry as well. All right. Wordsworth and Coleridge are the most representative writers. They explore new theories and innovate new techniques in versification. They believe that poetry could purify individual souls and society. For further study of their literary theory, please refer to Wordsworth's preface to the Lyrical Ballads and Coleridge's Biographia Literaria. So you can find out enough material which is about their literary theory in these two writings of them. Fine. So basically what happened there, like they basically believed on the purification of individual souls and societies as well. All right. Lake poets. So basically these are the lake poets which we are going to talk about now. Wordsworth, Coleridge and Southey were known as lake poets because they lived and knew one another in the last few years of the 18th century in the district of the Great Lakes in northwestern England. The former two published the Lyrical Ballads together in 1798. Okay, while all three of them had radical inclinations in their youth, but later turned conservative and received pensions and poet laureateships from the aristocracy. So basically these are known as lake poets, three poets, Wordsworth, Coleridge and Southey. All right. Other greatest Romantic poets are John Keats, P.B. Shelley and G.J. Byron. Okay. Karl Marx likes Byron and Shelley very much. All right. So years ago, Wordsworth and Coleridge were labeled negative Romantic poets, while Byron and Shelley were hailed as positive revolutionary Romantic poets. Wordsworth and Coleridge's literary achievements were underestimated for a long time. So here you can see might be at the start of the Romantic period they were considered as negative poets. All right. But later on, later on their literary achievements were acknowledged after some time. All right, here you can see the the concept of negative poets and the positive poets as well. But later on, like when we talk about the rulers of the Romantic era, so definitely we can say like we took a start of the Romantic era with the publication of the lyrical ballads by S.T. Coleridge and Wordsworth, but their efforts were not acknowledged at the start of the period or during a certain period of time. All right. Okay, my dear students, here previously when we were talking about the feminist works and the Gothic novels, the concept of Byronic heroes along with the Gothic novels we'll discuss today as well. Okay, feminist works of that time were done by Mary Wollstonecraft, and she wrote a vindication of the rights of women in 1792. Gothic novel, this is again a creation of the Romantic era. So what do we mean by Gothic novel? I'll tell you. Gothic novel is a type of romantic fiction that predominates in the late 18th century and continues to show its influence in early 19th century. Its principal elements are violence, horror, and the supernatural. So basically this is based on the romantic fiction, and you can see the principal themes of these kind of novels are violence, horror, and supernatural elements. Frankenstein by Mary Shelley and the Mysteries of Udolpho by Anne Radcliffe are masterpieces of English Gothic novel. So when you talk about Gothic novels, so these are basically the masterpiece of English Gothic novels. All right. English fiction gropes its way amidst the overwhelming romantic poetry. It revives its popularity in the hands of Jane Austen and Wordsworth. Okay, Wordsworth is noted for his historical novel based on Scottish history and legends. He exerted great influence on European literature of his time. Jane Austen is the first and foremost English women novelist. Following the neoclassical tradition, she is unsurpassed in the description of uneventful everyday life. So here, my dear students, basically we are talking about some of the novelists as well of that time, okay, and the feminist novelist or the poets of that time. All right, I'll just give you the briefing of the essayists in the English Romanticism as well. All right, so we'll talk about all the essays, novels, and different other genres as well in detail later on. All right, so essayists in English Romanticism were William Hazlitt, and his essays are very much familiar and very famous essays, and those are known as with the name of familiar essays. Okay, Charles Lamb, Essays of Elia, Tales from Shakespeare. All right, and Coleridge, Biographia Literaria. So my dear students, here you can see like these are the famous essayists of that time of the Romantic period. All right. Wordsworth, this is, you can say, the most important figure during the Romantic era. Okay, so William Wordsworth, he is a well-known poet, and he is famous among all generations, among all people of all ages. So my dear student, Wordsworth is the most representative poet of English Romanticism. He was born into a lawyer's family in 1770 at Cookmouth, Cumberland. His parents died when he was very young. All right, so this is the picture of William Wordsworth. All right, so my dear students, he is the representative poet of English Romanticism. Okay, he was taken care of by his relatives. So this is biography, you can say, in a nutshell of William Wordsworth. He was taken care of by his relatives. He got his education at the grammar school of Hawkshead and then at St. John's College, Cambridge. All right. He was a worshipper of nature from his childhood. He frequently visited places of beautiful scenery. A walking tour of the Swiss Alps heightened his addiction to nature. He had great sympathy with the French Revolution. He paid 2 visits to France. During the second visit, he fell in love with Antony Villon, who bore him a daughter. Okay, So here, my dear students, he was very much impressed by the French Revolution, plus since his childhood he was very much interested in nature. He was a worshipper of nature, so he went on many tours as well in order to observe nature. So it was basically in his genes to love nature. All right, so that was a kind of biography of William Wordsworth. Wordsworth was totally disillusioned by the Jacobin dictatorship and the French invasion, and the French invasion of other European countries. He became conservative in politics. He was labeled as negative romantic poet by Karl Marx and was severely criticized by Byron. So, my dear students, here you can see like Karl Marx and Byron, these are, you know, the opponents of William Wordsworth, and they call him negative romantic poet as well. My dear students, here you can see like this is a brief history of William Wordsworth. Like in 1795 he went with his sister, and the name of the sister Dorothy. So in 1797 he became Coleridge's friend. The three persons became three people with one soul. So here, my dear students, we are talking about St. Coleridge, William Wordsworth, and Dorothy Wordsworth, who is the sister of William Wordsworth. In literary history, they are known as three people with one soul because they contributed in many works. Okay, legend has that Wordsworth and his sister lived a kind of incestuous life during this period. Dorothy helped Wordsworth turn his eyes to the face of nature and preserve the poet in him. He served as Wordsworth's confident inspirer. As Wordsworth put in his poem, she gave me eyes, she gave me ears, and humble cares, and delicate fears, a heart, the fountain of sweet tears, and love, and thought, and joy. So here you can see like Wordsworth is praising his sister a lot here. So basically, she was the one who, you know, turned his eyes to the face of nature, plus she preserved the poet in him as well. All right. In 1798, Wordsworth and Coleridge published their lyrical ballads. In 1798 and 1799, he made a tour around Germany. Upon his return to England, he and his sister moved to Dove Cottage in Grasmere, the most beautiful place in the Lake District. Coleridge and Robert Southey lived a stone's throw from their dwelling place. The three poets came to be known as lake poets. All right. So that is why they are known as lake poets. Like St. Coleridge and Southey, they were already living over there, and you know, when he came back from Germany, Wordsworth came back from Germany. So what happened? He moved with his sister to the place. The name of the place is Dove Cottage, and you know, that is the most beautiful place in the Lake District. So that is why they are known as lake poets. All right. So here, my dear students, that is why they are known as lake poets. Okay, so in 1802 Wordsworth got married to Mary Hutchinson. In 1813 he got a job as distributor of stamps. So my dear students, this is the whole life history of William Wordsworth, which you can see here. All right. In 1842 he received a government pension, and in the following year he succeeded Southey as you know, poet laureate. He died at Royal Mount in 1850 and was buried in the Grasmere churchyard. So basically, this is the whole history of, you can say, life history of Wordsworth. So my dear student, what is basically the point of telling you the history, like how he was impressed by, you know, the nature. We'll discuss about certain themes in his writing. So these points are very much important here. His major works. Wordsworth's fame lies chiefly in his short poems. His short poems fall into two categories: poem about nature and poems about human life. So my dear students, here you can see like we categorize Wordsworth's poems into two categories. One is about nature and the other one is about human life. All right. He is a worshipper of nature, as I told you before as well. It is nature that gives him strength and knowledge full of grace. Okay. So basically, you can see the theme of nature everywhere present in his writing. So basically, he talked about human life, he talked about nature in his writings. All right. His best known poems of nature include I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud, Tenton Abbey, To the Cuckoo, My Heart Leaps Out, To a Butterfly, An Evening Walk, and The Sparrow's Nest. So basically, these are his best known poems, which are about nature, okay. His best known poems about human life include Lucy Poems, The Solitary Ripper, and The Old Cumberland Beggar, Michael and To a Highland Girl. So my dear students, here you can see that these poems are like the later poems. These are basically dependent upon the lives of any particular character, alright. So previously it was about nature. For example, if we talk about To the Cuckoo, this is a short poem written by Wordsworth. So basically the theme of nature is present over there. When we talk about the Solitary Ripper, so the theme of human life is there, because in that poem you can see like the poet describes the experience of a girl who is singing a song, alright, or to a highland girl. So basically nature plus human life both are present here in his later poems. So in the first category you can see the element of nature, in the second one nature plus human life both go simultaneously, alright. Wordsworth wrote many sonnets. His famous sonnets are Earth has not anything to show more fair, On the extension of the Ventian Republic, and Thought of a Britain, on the subjugation of Switzerland. So basically these are his sonnets, okay. His best known long poem is the Prelude. So this is basically the only, here dear students you can see like this is the only best known poem which is written by William Wordsworth. The name of the poem is the Prelude. Okay, in this poem Wordsworth analyzes the growth of his, in this poem Wordsworth analyzes the growth of his poetic genius during his childhood and youth, and recalls the lesson he owes to nature. So basically this the Prelude is about his life experience, about his life history, okay, how he he grew up with the nature, and from childhood to youth, how did he cover the distance, okay. So basically when we talk about Wordsworth's poems, so there are two categories. One is about nature and the other one is about human life. So we talked about his sonnets as well. That's a 14-line poem, alright, and then his long poem the Prelude, that's a very famous work, okay. Wordsworth's greatest contribution to English literature is his poems and his preface to the lyrical ballads as well. Though the lyrical ballad is known as a collaborated work of Wordsworth and Coleridge, all the poems but one, The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, are written by Wordsworth, okay. Most of his quoted poems are taken from his collection. So basically the greatest contribution is done by William Wordsworth in the the lyrical ballads. Although we call it a collaborated work, like he did it with with S.T. Coleridge, but most of the poems are written by Wordsworth in the lyrical ballads, alright. So I'll tell you some of the things regarding to the preface to the lyrical ballads. So this is basically the preface to the lyrical ballads, and then the lyrical ballads would come. So I'll tell you some of the important points, the preface to the lyrical ballads, alright. So my dear students, you'll have to keep in mind the preface to the lyrical ballads, that's another thing, and the lyrical ballads, that is another thing, okay. Wordsworth's preface to lyrical ballads is the manifesto of English Romanticism. It is one of the revolutionary works of criticism, helping ushers in the Romantic age in literature, alright. He is primarily concerned to justify the kinds of his poem which he had contributed to lyrical ballads. So this is a kind of criticism, alright. A preface to lyrical ballads, it is a criticism, alright, where he he's justifying the kinds of his poems which he had contributed to lyrical ballads, and that was written in 1800. So my dear students, here you can say lyrical ballads was published in 1798, and right after 2 years he wrote the preface to the lyrical ballads in order to justify the kinds of poems he has written in the lyrical ballads. So it was, you can see, the lyrical ballads, preface to the lyrical ballads was published after the lyrical ballads, alright. Key points in his preface: definition of a poet. So basically in the preface to the lyrical ballads, so he talked about poetry a lot, okay. So what is basically the definition of a poet? He is a man speaking to man, a man, it is true, and adorned with more lively sensibility, more enthusiasm and tenderness, who has a greater knowledge of human nature and a more comprehensive soul than are supposed to be common among mankind. So basically he is a person. A poet is not somebody who is extraordinary and who is having a greater imaginative power or something like that. He is basically a man speaking to man, all right? A man, it is true, endowed with more lively sensibility. So here basically the person is sensible, he is not a fool here, okay? More enthusiastic and tender as well, and who has a greater knowledge of human nature as well. So it doesn't mean that he has a very limited knowledge of human nature. He knows about the human nature and a more comprehensive soul as well, where he can feel the sensitivities of human life then are supposed to be common among mankind. Basically poet is common among mankind. So this is the definition of a poet according to Wordsworth, that is present in his preface to Lyrical Ballads. Alright, creative process of authentic poetry. Poetry is a spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings, as I told you before as well. It takes its origin from emotional recollected in tranquility. The emotion is contemplated till by a species of reaction. The tranquility gradually disappears and an emotion kindred to that which before was the subject of contemplation is gradually produced and does itself actually exist in the mind. In this mood successfully composition generally begins. So basically poetry is you can say a creative process, okay? So basically he calls poetry a creative process, and he can say like here he is telling the whole creative process of authentic poetry as well, like this is a spontaneous overflow of powerful emotions, and then how can you recollect the information, and then how can you feel anything, and then you make it subject of contemplation, and then you compose something. All right, so basically this is his definition of creative process of authentic poetry. So imitation, previously we were talking about like the Aristotle's poetry. All right, what was that? An imitation of you can say human life, okay? So a copy of human lives only. So basically this is a spontaneous overflow. This is not created by something. This is just spontaneous. This is a natural overflow. All right, subject matter and poetic language. The principal object was to choose incidents and situations from common life. So my dear students, here you can see like the incidents and the situations, these are from common life. So basically the emphasis of Wordsworth's poetry is on common life, all right, and to relate or describe them throughout as far as possible in a selection of language rarely used by men, and at the same time to throw over them a certain coloring of imagination, whereby ordinary things should be presented in an unusual aspect. So my dear students, here you can see the definition of the subject matter and the poetic language as well. As far as the poetic language is concerned, so you can see the ordinary things should be presented in an unusual aspect, okay? This is one point, and that's relevant to the later concept of poetic language, like which kind of language you can use. All right, so basically subject matter, what should be the subject matter of poetry according to Wordsworth in his preface to Lyrical Ballads? That is based on the incidents and the situations of common life, which is not something about royal life or the life of the people who are not part of this world. That's about common life, about you can say middle class or lower middle class. All right, so here my dear students, as I told you before as well, Wordsworth was in favor of the French Revolution a lot, okay, and he was against the age of reason, the thoughts of the classical period in the history of English literature as well. Focus here is on nature plus on common life, all right, on human life, okay? So here basically the subject matters should be from the incidents and the situations of the common life, all right? Humble and rustic life was generally chosen because in that condition the essential passions of the heart find a better soil in which they can attain their maturity. So for that purpose humble and rustic life was chosen. The language too of these men has been adopted, purified indeed from what appears to be its real defects, from all lasting and rational causes of dislike or disgust, because such men overly communicate with the best objects from which the best part of language is originally derived. So here, my dear students, again that is a continuation of the previous concept, subject matter and poetic language. So dear students, here you can see like these must be the characteristics of the subject matter. You can discuss about the subject matter here, and the kind of poetic language, again that's the overflow, spontaneous overflow of the powerful emotion. So poets, they do not need to follow certain kinds of rules and regulations in order to produce any kind of poetry. This is you can say in a nutshell the definition of how to write poetry in Wordsworth's words. Alright, brief comments on Wordsworth poetry. Wordsworth is the representative poet of English Romanticism. There is no doubt in it. Wordsworth poetry is distinguished by the simplicity and purity of his language. So my dear students, here you can see his poetry is simple as well as pure. He used pure language. Okay, Wordsworth's theory on versification has exerted profound influence on later poets. Okay, Mimes is imaginative recreation. All right, my dear students, here you can see like you can see the influence of Wordsworth's poetry on the later poets as well. So we'll talk about when we'll move towards the modern period in the history of English literature. So we'll talk about those writers or the poets as well. So this is basically a brief comment. So I'll just remind you some of the things from Wordsworth's poetry, because he was the most dominating figure in the Romantic era. He focused on nature plus on human life. All right, so or you can say on human beings only. So my dear students, here you'll have to keep in mind that basically he was the one who you can say who brought revolution in the history of English literature as well. How? Because he changed the trends or the you can say the techniques of writing or producing literature by introducing the new trends. All right, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, another important figure in the Romantic era, and he is known as St. Coleridge, and he is the co-writer of the lyrical ballads as well. Let me remind you, Samuel Taylor Coleridge was born into a clergyman's family in 1772. He was a great genius. At the age of 6, he had read the Bible, Robinson Crusoe and Arabian Nights. He was a mentally precocious boy full of fantasy and dreams in his mind. During his Cambridge years, he made friends with Charles Lamb, the greatest essayist of English Romanticism. So my dear students, here you can see like he was a friend of Charles Lamb, who is a great essayist of this period as well. So he was very intellectual, very genius. Okay, we are talking about St. Coleridge here. All right. But the campus life bored him. He ran away from the university and enlisted in the army, but discharged after a few months, and he returned to Cambridge. All right. He joined Robert Southey in a utopian plan of establishing an ideal democratic community named Pentecosty in America. The plan resulted in nothing but his marriage to Sarah Fricker, which turned out to be an unhappy marriage. So this is the whole life history of St. Coleridge. In 1797, he began his friendship with Wordsworth. In 1798, they published the lyrical ballads. As I told you many times before, that these are the writers of the lyrical ballads, William Wordsworth and St. Coleridge. All right. In 1798, he traveled to Germany with Wordsworth and began to take to Germany philosophy. Upon his return to England, he became addicted to opium. With a view to relieving his headache, he quarreled seriously with Wordsworth in 1810. Though they were reconciled to each other later, their friendship had never reached its former intimacy. All right. In his later years, he turned conservative and resorted to theology of his spiritual support. So my dear students, here you can see that this is the whole history, like how did they write lyrical ballads in 1798, and then how they had a quarrel with each other in 1817. That was sorted out, but they could never be friends again after that quarrel. All right. Okay, my dear students, here you can see like his demonic poems are The Name of the Ancient Mariner, Kublai Khan and Christabel. Okay, so these are known as his demonic poems. His conversational poems are Frost at Morning, Dejection, that is an ode. Essays, biography, literature, lectures on Shakespeare. Alright, so my dear students, these are his eminent works or the major works. Alright, The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. Alright, so my dear students, here we will talk about his work, The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. It is Coleridge's contribution to the lyrical ballads. He tells us a strange story in ballad meter. Three guests are on their way to a wedding party when an ancient mariner stopped one of them. The mariner tells of the adventures on the sea when his ship sails towards the South Pole. An albatross comes through the snow fog and alights on the rigging. So basically this is the story of the Rime of the Ancient Mariner, and this is a contribution to the lyrical ballads as well. So this story is about three guests who are on the way to a wedding party. So that's the story. The mariner shoots at its quite thoughtlessly. Then misfortune befalls the whole crew, with the only exception of the old mariner, die of thirst as punishment for the act of inhospitality. The spell breaks only when the mariner repents his cruelty. Okay, the poem is famous for its beautiful cadence and wonderful imagery. The combination of the natural and supernatural, the ordinary and extraordinary, makes it one of the masterpieces of romantic poetry. So my dear students, the Rime of the Ancient Mariner, that is a part of the lyrical ballad. So here I told you the story as well of what happened with them. So basically this is a combination of natural plus supernatural element, and you can see a depiction of beautiful imagery, wonderful imagery is present here in this. So my dear students, here you can say that is why this is known as the masterpiece of romantic poetry, because of its because of the ordinary and extraordinary elements from the society. Basically this is a story of three guests. Alright, so Kubla Khan, that is written by S.T. Coleridge. During an illness in 1797, Coleridge retired to a lonely farmhouse. One day he fell asleep as he was reading a passage about Kubla Khan from Coleridge by Purchas. While dreaming, he composed a poem about 200 or 300 lines. On waking, he began to write down the poem, but he was interrupted by a person on business from Pollock, and the vision faded. He left a fragment of only 54 lines and never finished the poem. So this is an incomplete poem as well. Basically that is based on a dream. So he was reading a he was reading a passage about Kubla Khan from Pilgrimage of Purchas, and then he slept. While dreaming, he saw the image of Kubla Khan, and then he presented it. Okay, although that poem is can be composed of 200 to 300 lines, but he was interrupted by somebody. That is why he could just write 54 lines, and that's why this is an incomplete poem as well. And the supernatural elements are there, imagination is there. Christabel, it tells a story of a sorcerer who casts a spell over a pure young girl. It is written in ballad meter. Its mysterious atmosphere and the Gothic horror may freeze our blood. It is not wholesome to read the poem. So basically this is about horror and is based upon suspense as well. Okay, so this is a brief description of the poem. Okay, Biographia Literaria, another work that is written by S.T. Coleridge. It is his most influential book of literary essays. The main ideas can be summed up as follows. A poem should not be judged as a mirror of truth as we judge science, but as a thing in itself, almost as a living organism. So basically here he is comparing poem with the science. Like we should not judge a poem like science, like it's a mirror of truth. All right, but basically poem is a thing in itself, and this is a living organism as well. Okay, so here basically in Biography Literaria, this is basically about his literary essays which he wrote. Okay, and where he compared poem with science. Okay, poets are born and are not made. So basically here he is talking about the creativity of poets, that you cannot make poets, they are born. Poems should be judged only according to their own lights and not according to any established perspective or precedent. So my dear students, here you can see like here there is an element of subjectivity which is present here in his point of view, like you should judge the poems according to their own lights, like there are certain lights which are attached with a certain poem, so but not into any established perspective or precedent, like you already have established certain trends and you are analyzing poems according to that. It should not be done this way. Like poems, they already have lights with them, so you'll have to analyze, read a poem according to lights, alright, those lights which are attached with any particular poem. Alright, my dear students, another important point which is there, that the poet is a man of great integrity as well as of special gifts, producing poems which would offer profound insights into man's imagination, psychological and ultimately moral beings as well. So this is his point, alright. So my dear students, you have to keep in mind here our focus is on poets, they should take care of, according to Coleridge, they should take care of man's imagination, of the psychology of man, and a man is a moral being, so he has to take care of all these things, alright. Comments on S.T. Coleridge works. Coleridge is a great romantic poet, no doubt in it. His poetic imagination is unique. He is fond of unusual and supernatural things. So you could see in Kublai Khan as well, that is purely a supernatural poem. Coleridge is one of the first critics to pay close attention to language of poetry. He maintains that the true end of poetry is to give pleasure through the medium of beauty. So what basically is the medium of beauty? That is the language of poetry, alright. So he was basically the first one who pays attention to the language of poetry during the Romantic era, alright. George Gordon Byron, so his period was started in 1788 and he died in 1824, alright. So my dear students, biographical introduction, as I'm giving you the introduction of all the poets of that area. Byron was born into an aristocratic family. His father is a profligate, okay, his mother was a passionate Scots woman. He was born with a clubfoot, which made him feel sore and unhappy all his life. He was a radical supporter of workers' movement. So my dear students, here this is the biographical introduction of G.G. Byron, alright. So this is the biographical introduction of G.G. Byron, okay, the kind of family where he took birth, and then he had a clubfoot, and that's why he was unhappy throughout his life just because of that foot, alright. In 1811, Byron took seat in the House of Lords. He made vehement speeches to attack English government's policy for the Luddites, worker who destroy machinery. So basically, so my dear students, here you can see like this is an attack on the English government who made policies for the workers who destroy machinery at that time. So Byron left England forever in 1816. Okay, he first visited Switzerland, where he made acquaintance with Shelley. He wrote sonnet on Shelley in Switzerland. Then he moved to Italy, where he finished Childe Harold pilgrimage and wrote his masterpiece Don Juan. And he wrote his masterpiece Don Juan. Okay. Upon hearing the news of Greek revolt against the Turks, Byron plunged himself into the struggle. The Greeks made him commander-in-chief of their forces in 1872. Due to months' hard work under bad weather, he fell ill and unfortunately died. The Greek people mourned over his premature death. Okay, Byron was regarded as the satanic poet by the English government. When he died, it was not until 1969 that a white marble memorial to Byron was erected in Westminster Abbey. Nowadays his name is put in the Poets' Corner. So basically he was you can say a political figure as well, alright. So this is all his contribution in in other works which are not relevant to literature. And you can see like he was regarded as the satanic poet by the English government as well, because he left England. Okay, where did he go, by the way? Okay, and then he visited Switzerland and then Italy, alright. His major works are long poems or collections are Hours of Idleness, English Bards and Scottic Reviewers, Childe Harold's Pilgrimage, okay, and Don Juan, as I told you before as well. Best known single poems in China, okay. When we two parted, She walks in beauty, the Aeschylus of Greece from Don Juan. This is from his long poem, Sonnet on Schillen. Okay, my dear students, here you can see these are his you can say major contributions to the English literature. Okay, so I'll just comment on his works briefly. Byron's poetry is based upon his own experience. His heroes are more or less pictures of himself. His hero is known as Byronic hero, a proud, mysterious rebel, figure of noble origin. For such a hero, the conflict is usually one of the rebellious individual against the outworn social system and convention. So basically, we had discussed enough about Byronic hero before. Okay, so basically you can see like his poetry is based upon his own experience. So basically all the heroes in his poetry, these are the pictures of himself, you can say. The figure is to some extent model on the life and personality of Byron. So Byronic hero, you can say, when we talk about Byronic hero, so basically that is the depiction of Byron's personality. Byron's poetry exerts great influence on the Romantic movement. He stands with Shakespeare and Scott among the British writers who exert great influence over the mainland of Europe. So my dear students, he is a very well-known poet in the history of English literature. Alright. P.B. Shelley, another poet, and he was born in 1792 and died in 1822. Alright, life story. Shelley was born into an affluent family at Sussex. He got a very good school education, first at Eton and then at Oxford. In 1811, while he was still a student at Oxford, he wrote a pamphlet, The Necessity of Atheism, repudiating the existence of God. So, as a student he wrote this pamphlet, and which got popularity. Alright, he was expelled from Oxford for his seditious pamphlet. Then he eloped with Harriet Westbrook in Edinburgh. Okay, so then he eloped with Harriet Westbrook in Edinburgh. When he returned to London, he became a disciple of Williams Godwin. He became a disciple of Williams Godwin, a radical social philosopher. He fell in love with Godwin's daughter. Harriet drawing enabled him to marry Godwin's daughter, but left him a bad reputation as an immoralist. He left England and went to the continent. So basically this is the whole history of Shelley, P.B. Shelley. Alright, he made friends with Byron while they were in Geneva, Switzerland. He wrote his best poems during this period. Okay, on July 8, 1822, while he was sailing in a small boat along the coast of Italy, a tempest struck his boat and he was drowned. He was buried in Rome. The inscription on his tombstone reads, Percy Bysshe Shelley. Okay, cor cordium, meaning heart of hearts. So my dear students, here you can see like cor cordium means heart of hearts. Alright, so dear, that's the life history of you can say a brief life history of P.B. Shelley. Alright, upon his untimely death, one of his opponents writes, Shelley, the writer of some infidel poetry, has been drowned. Now he knows whether there is a God or not. So basically he is commenting on his poetry in an indirect way. So now he'll get to know that whether there is God or not. Engels thinks highly of Shelley and Byron. He writes, Shelley the genius, the prophet, Shelley and Byron, with his glowing sensuality and his bitter satire upon our existing society, find most of their readers in the proletariat. So my dear students, here you can see the comments of two different people. One is the opponent of Shelley and the other one is you can say the admirer of his poetry. So you can compare their comments as well. Okay, his major works are Ode to the West Wind, To a Skylark, The Cloud, Prometheus Unbound, Queen Mab, the Mask of Anarchy, The Necessity of Atheism, A Defense of Poetry. Alright, I'll just comment on his works. Shelley grew up with revolutionary ideas under the influence of Hume and Godwin. He held a lifelong aversion to cruelty, injustice, authority, and institutional religion. Shelley is one of the greatest English lyrical poets. He expresses his love for freedom and his hatred towards tyranny. So my dear students, here you can say these are basically these are his points which we can refer to, and these are very much obvious in his writings as well, because he faced a lot of injustice and the institutional and religion, you can say, cruelty in his life. That is why these elements are very much obvious in his writings. All right, his poems abound with personification, metaphor, and other figures of speech. So I hope you know about personification and metaphor so far, because I told you in detail. Shelley is one of the most important dramatists of English Romanticism. His greatest achievement in theatre lies in his poetic drama Prometheus Unbound. So my dear students, as at times Shelley was not only a poet, he was a dramatist as well, and this is his famous work. Okay, so my dear student, today we talked about the spirit of Romanticism and the eminent poets. Today basically our focus was on the poetry of the Romantic era in the history of English literature, and then we were talking about the 19th century literature, all right, and we talked about the works of eminent poets there. So I hope now the idea of Romanticism would be quite clear to you. Okay, so we focused on the works of William Wordsworth, S.T. Coleridge, J.J. Byron, P.B. Shelley, and John Keats. Okay, John Keats is left, so we'll talk about his works in detail in the next lecture. Okay, so hope to see you again. Have a nice day. Allah Hafiz.